So, a Danish presidency again in a very tough moment. As it was written in Denmark's program, it is going to be really challenging. What risks does Denmark see for this first semester of this year?
I mean, the biggest problem we are faced with, that is, of course, the debt crisis and the consequences of the debt crisis. I mean, we are in the worst economic situation in Europe since the Second World War. So this, of course, gives some very, very serious problems for everybody. And we do, of course, have to try to handle them. And as you know, that in a week's time, the 27 prime ministers and presidents in the EU will meet in order to politically agree upon a fiscal pact which should help consolidate the economies in some southern European countries.
Danish Prime Minister participated in the World Economic Forum in Davos, and yesterday she spoke about the fiscal pact, and it seems that Denmark is going to support it. Is that correct?
We expect that. Of course, we will have to see the final version of the text. All nations will have to see the final version. But I mean, it seems as if that it is going to be a very good one, and therefore, of course, also we expect that not only Denmark, but that all participating countries will join this fiscal pact. Yes.
Yeah, because she said that this is the second best thing after amendments to the treaties, which was impossible.
That's exactly. I mean, because as you know, because of one member state, it was not possible to amend the treaty, and therefore, I mean, you are forced to do something outside the treaty.
Right.
So, I mean, this is for obvious reasons the second best thing to do. Yes.
In the latest draft, I don't know what will be the final text, of course, but there was a notion for the opt-out countries, maybe including Denmark. Is this the thing that actually makes and keeps the unity in the European Union and actually makes all these reluctant countries to support it?
Well, I think that exactly what you are saying is right. I mean, because there is this degree of flexibility, it makes much more certain that the involved member states will join in, yes.
Poland, it was the previous presidency, actually after the end of their semester, there were statements that actually it was a good thing that a non-Eurozone country was at the help of the European Union because, a bit objective view at the developments. Do you agree with this? Do you think that it's an advantage that a non-Eurozone member is a EU president?
In a way, yes. Because I think that if it had been a Eurozone country that now had been president of the Council in the EU, you might have risked, I'm not saying that it would have happened, I say that it may have happened, that people living in the non-Eurozone countries would have felt that it was the Eurozone countries that ran the whole show. That the EU could have had a PR problem towards 10 member states' populations, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, kind of diktat to all the others.
Yes. But I mean, now also the populations in the 10 non-Eurozone countries, they know that they are also represented at the table, so to say, by the Danish presidency.
Yeah, but Denmark is a very special case because it has an opt-out. It doesn't want to be a member of the Eurozone.
Well, doesn't want. No, that's not true.
No?
Well, I mean, certainly at the right moment we would like to join. But you cannot really say that during a heavy economic crisis it is the right moment to join the Eurozone.
But isn't it different than the new member states which have committed?
Yes.
So it's a bit different.
It's a bit different, yes. I mean, we have the free choice. You don't. The moment when you meet the criteria, you must join.
Yeah,
just like Estonia has done, Slovenia has done,
right.
Slovakia has done.
But do you think that this is a kind of weakness? Because there was an incident, it was reported as an incident at the December European Council when the French president a bit rebuked the Danish Prime Minister precisely for this.
Well, I don't think he really rebuked her for that. As far as I know, this incident you refer to happened early in the morning. After a long night's discussions. Yeah. We all know that people can be a little bit irritated and agitated in the wee hours after a whole long night of discussions. And then you perhaps say something which you perhaps are not so happy with afterwards. I think that at least the way it was being told to me, then the French presidency, he said something about that the Danish Prime Minister was a very new Prime Minister, and therefore, I mean, she should not speak so much when those who had been presidents or prime ministers for many years when they were discussing matters.
So what you're saying, politicians are humans after all.
Of course,
so such incidents happen.
We are all human beings.
Right. So it seems that the Eurozone is very important for Denmark too.
Oh yes, I mean, if the Eurozone gets into real problems, I mean, we will all get into problems.
So this is one of the strongest arguments.
I mean, all 27 economies are interlinked because of the internal market, the single market. So I mean, if anything goes wrong, really wrong in the Eurozone, we will all feel it. You will feel it, Denmark will feel it, Britain will feel it, we will all feel it.
Do you have any figures to what extent Denmark is affected by the Eurozone crisis?
Yes, I mean, economic growth is not what it used to be. I mean, economic growth is down to 1%, I think. It used to be around 2.5%. I know that 2.5% you here in Bulgaria would not regard as very much. You were
getting used to it.
You were used to much higher figures before the crisis, but you know, in the old Western Europe, 2.5% growth. We regard that as nice. So we are down to 1%, and also, of course, our national debt is going up because our unemployment rate has gone up. I mean, it has gone up to, I think, around 5%. That is low by Bulgarian standards, but you know, before the crisis, I think our unemployment rate was 1.5%. So it really has gone up, and this, of course, means that when we have this crisis, people get fired. I mean, it means that the government will not have as much tax money as it used to have. It also means that people are a bit reluctant about buying new cars or televisions and things like that. This also means that the government will not have as much VAT taxation money as it used to have. And at the same time, because the unemployment rate is going up, the government will have to pay out more in social assistance to those unemployed. Yeah. So I mean, therefore, I mean, the crisis certainly means something. It also means that our export has gone down, because in other countries there's also an economic crisis. So people there and companies there are buying less. So I mean, yes, certainly Denmark is affected by the crisis, just as Bulgaria is affected by the crisis. I mean, two countries that are not members of the Eurozone, so they are both affected by the crisis. This simply shows how much interlinked our economies are.
Well, Bulgaria is not very willing to admit that it is that much affected by the crisis, but nonetheless, it is hardly a good time to discuss Schengen right now, but obviously life goes on, and the reform of this legislation is underway. So there is this, do you have expectation that there would be some kind of progress on Bulgaria's and Romania's accession to Schengen during Danish presidency?
We certainly hope so, and I'm sure you know that yesterday and the day before there was an informal ministerial meeting in Denmark for ministers of justice and interior, and there the Danish President of the Council, the Danish Minister of Justice. I mean, he has made it very clear that he would very much like to see that a decision on Bulgaria and Romania joining Schengen should take place during the Danish presidency, because our position is that there are no technical or legal obstacles to Bulgaria and Romania joining Schengen.
So Denmark is not sharing the Netherlands' position.
Certainly not.
That there should be other criteria.
I mean, we are working at getting a compromise which everybody can accept.
But there's a feeling in Bulgaria's position. I'm referring to Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Tsvetanov's statements, and it seems he's implying that joining Schengen is no longer a priority. Do you have this feeling?
I don't know. I mean, we all know that governments and countries' priorities they can change, and I mean, it's very possible that the priorities of Bulgaria have changed.
But this shouldn't impact on the overall process of the accession.
Well, I mean, there are so many processes in the EU going on the same time. I mean, they are on Schengen, they are on the fiscal pact, there is on the patent, there is on the EU's budget from 2014 to 2020. I mean, you have hundreds of issues moving along in the EU system. And I mean, they will move on regardless of what one or a few or several or many member countries think. Because when you start a process in the EU, it's just like starting a train. The process and the train will move on to the final station.
Right. Well, Denmark is an old member state, so maybe it's not very easily impressed by such things, but it's 5 years now since Bulgaria has joined the European Union. Could you outline the mistakes for these 5 years, or the successes, or both would be even best?
Well, I think that the biggest mistake is that Bulgaria has not, in the first 5 years of its membership, been in a position to utilize more money from the EU funds. I mean, in this current budget, EU budget period, from 2007 until 2013, that means 2 more years from now, 7-year period, as far as I understand, Bulgaria has only been in a position to use 20% of what could have been used. I mean, this means that you only have 2 years left to use 80%. And I mean, we are talking about billions here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really much money. But therefore, I also think it's a very good idea that the government has now agreed with the World Bank and the European Investment Bank and the European East Bank and the Commission that in the next 2 years, real efforts should be made in order to bring those 20% up to at least 40% and perhaps hopefully closer to 50%. Because, I mean, it is simply so much money. We talk about billions here. So I mean, the more money Bulgaria can get out and use for all these things. I mean, we talk about infrastructure projects, we talk about education and science and research and small and medium-sized companies, agricultural land and farms. I mean, there's so much money.
We could have been much better.
Yes, you could have been much better off. So I mean, hopefully you will be able in the next 2 years really to get some more money out of the EU, and hopefully in the next EU budget period from 2014 to 2020, hopefully you could bring that figure as close to 100% as possible.
It depends on the argument that the Bulgarian government will have.
No, it does not depend on the argument. It depends on administrative capacity. It depends on whether the various administrative processes in this country can move fast enough and effectively enough and come up with good, solid projects. And that's also why I think the government has decided to agree with the World Bank and the European Investment Bank, the European East Bank, and the Commission, that together they should try to make these administrative processes much more effective.
Let's hope that 2 years will be enough to see some results in this area. Can you think of any other mistake or good thing?
Well, I mean, you could also say either the other way around. The good thing is, of course, that Bulgaria in the first 5 years has been able to use 20% of the possible EU money, because we are talking about hundreds of millions of livers here. So, I mean, that is, of course, a very good thing. I also think it is a very good thing that after you joined the EU, I mean, you can travel freely in Europe.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. That's why I guess Schengen should be also very important.
Yes, but I mean, I do understand if some people say, well, Schengen, what is that? I mean, you know, of course, that neither Britain nor Ireland is a member of Schengen. I mean, what does Schengen mean in real life? Well, the only thing it means is that you shall show your passport or your national ID when you cross a border to a Schengen country. I mean, what is really the problem?
Well, you can see it when you travel by car throughout Europe, and it's one thing when you're an Irish, and it's slightly different when you're Bulgarian, because the Irish, it's their wish, or the British, not to be part of Schengen, while we are just on the other side, we're not accepted, if you know what I mean. Because we're not ready, we don't fit in.
Well, I mean, you are ready. I mean, I think everybody...
Technically.
I think everybody agree upon that Bulgaria technically is ready.
The Netherlands doesn't.
No, but I mean, I don't think that they disagree that you are technically ready. I've never heard that.
Sure, for sure.
So I mean, I think everybody agree that you are technically ready.
But I think that there should be something more.
Yeah, but I mean, what is the problem? I mean, Denmark, as you know, is part of Schengen. Bulgaria, for the time being, is not. But I mean, when you fly to Denmark or you fly from Denmark to Bulgaria, I mean, what really is the problem in showing your passport?
No, when you're flying.
It's and I mean, even by car. I mean, what is when you drive to the border to Hungary, to the first Schengen country, I mean, what problem is there in showing your passport there?
You're kind of reducing the significance of Schengen.
Well, I mean, personally, I have always thought that it was symbolic. But I mean,
but Denmark reinstated border control last year.
No. What the previous government did in Denmark was to say we want to have some customs control.
Right.
I mean, it was not a passport control.
Okay.
It was a customs control because there was. The previous government thought that there was too much illegal imports of weapons, hand weapons, and of narcotics.
Right.
And therefore, simply they wanted to have control with that.
But the current government doesn't feel things that way.
The present government thinks that it is better to do that sort of control in what is called hinterland patrols. That means that in the areas up to the land border, you simply do random checks.
And at the end, do you feel optimistic for this year, for the future of the Union, for how things will develop?
Yes, I think that one should be optimistic. It's clear that right now we are all feeling hard times in Europe. But I think we are at the bottom right now. We will probably stay a little while here at the bottom, but I think that after the fiscal compact has been adopted in March, then it is clear to the financial markets that we here in Europe, we are really, really, really eager at defending our economic and financial positions. And I mean, you also have to remember that one priority for the Danish presidency, apart from fiscal discipline, then the other main priority, that is economic growth. And economic growth will be created by modernizing the single market. I mean, there are 12 initiatives there which we will move forward in order to help generate economic growth in Europe.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.